All right, let's talk Nebraska Cornhuskers. Obviously, the season did not go the way many people had hoped for when it came to the Huskers, but they're making big moves this offseason, and they quietly made an outstanding hire at a key part of this coaching staff. We'll get into the latest there and why this was a steal for Nebraska. But first, I'm Nick, and this is Saturday Morning Inspection. All right, this Cornhuskers program, a little bit of a crossroads now under Matt Rule, right? They've improved. They've gone away from the Scott Frost disaster to the point now where they're, baseline competent. And that, of course, is important. But that's not the goal. We all understand Nebraska is one of those blue blood dynastic programs in college football history, getting back to the top of winning, conference games and going to the playoff and being a 10, 11, 12 win kind of football team. That is the goal. That should be the standard for the Huskers. And Matt Rule is doing everything possible to get back to that standard, including making some absolutely spectacular hires. And earlier this week, a few days ago, he made quietly a really good hire. It didn't get a lot of national media attention, but when I dove into the numbers, guys, this was an A-plus move. Let's get into the report to refresh everyone's memory. Then we'll get into the data on the other side. So this is courtesy of Pete Thamel. Sources: Nebraska has agreed to a 3-year deal to make San Diego State's Rob Auric the school's next defensive coordinator. San Diego State finished number 5 in scoring defense this year at 12.6 points per game. That's a pretty darn good number, if I'm being honest. An improvement up from number 97 last year at 29.6 points per game. That is a staggering level of improvement. Great job by Auric and, of course, the defensive players with the San Diego State Aztecs. So, again, this is a hire that seems, good and solid. And when people looked at this move, people, didn't get a lot of attention. People probably said, it's just an ordinary hire, guy going from a lower level college football to higher level college football. And listen, at a face level, that's kind of what it looks like. But when you dive into the details and look at San Diego State's numbers from last year, it's off the charts of how good Auric was. So let's get into our first graphic here. And all these graphics are courtesy of the True Media Analytics platform. Great analytics site. We love using True Media, so highly recommend anyone who's looking for a football analytics platform to use. They are fantastic. But you can see here's the defensive dominance of San Diego State last year. And the x-axis, you've got their defensive EPA per dropback per pass. EPA, for those of you who are unfamiliar, is expected points added. It's a pretty solid analytical metric. It kind of avoids the trap that can sometimes happen if you use total yards or total points. We'll get to those in just a second. But, it's a situation. So let's say it's 3rd and 15, and you throw a 12-yard pass, and then you punt. It looks like you surrendered a 12-yard pass, which would be not great ideally, but you forced a punt. So actually, that was a winning play. EPA factors in that kind of thing. And on the y-axis there, you see defensive EPA per rush. So you see x-axis, how are you in terms of EPA on an EPA basis, defending against the pass, and the y-axis, how good are you at defending against the rush, again, on an EPA basis. And you can see the San Diego State Aztecs right there. Everyone else is sort of faint, just to highlight where San Diego State was last year. One of the best in college football. In fact, against the pass, they were the 3rd best defense in all of college football against the rush. They were a top, basically 10% defense before it's all said and done. And you can kind of see Nebraska there, guys, all the way there, kind of in the bottom right quadrant. You can see that N right there, right around. If you look where EPA per pass is 0, go straight up, and you can see in that first horizontal line, there's Nebraska. So they've been not good defensively on an EPA basis last year. They want to get a whole lot closer to where San Diego State was last year. And Auric was a guy who's big in improvement, obviously massive job for the Aztecs. They hope to see that big leap from what we saw from San Diego State in 2025 with Nebraska in 2026. But the statistical dominance doesn't end there from what Auric did last year. Let's pull up total yardage and points. We talked about it on an EPA basis, an analytical basis. Let's look into just raw data, raw yardage and points. How'd you do there? Well, you can see San Diego State there again. Everyone else is kind of faint there, but there you can see the Aztecs, bottom left quadrant, which is good, right? You want to give up the fewest yards and the fewest points. And actually, in college football last year, and this is across college football in general, on a yardage basis, they surrendered the 4th fewest yards per game across all of college football. And on a points basis right there, they surrendered, again, what looks like the 5th fewest points per game. This is an elite defense. And you look at the teams around them. You've got Oklahoma, Miami, Oregon, Ohio State, right? Texas Tech, Indiana. You're talking about playoff teams. I understand the competition for San Diego State is different. But listen, Auric was going up against lower competition, but he had lower competition guys on his team, and he led them to an elite level performance. Going to Nebraska, he should have better players to match the better competition. I expect him to perform at a very similar level. Again, did a phenomenal job. And you can see Nebraska. You can see, if you look at right there, kind of in the middle, you can, if you go to, for example, 4,000 and go straight up and a little bit to the left, you can see Nebraska right there. Again, not terrible defensively on a pure raw data perspective in terms of yards and points allowed, but more middle of the pack, not good enough enough in terms of winning the Big Ten, not good enough in terms of competing at a high level. Alrick could bring a massive improvement with this Cornhuskers defense like he did with San Diego State. And finally, here our final statistic, and I want to bring this up because I think it's really important, and this is sacks and takeaways. So takeaways is the y-axis right there. The sacks is the x-axis. And you can see San Diego State above average in sacks. That's good to see that. But takeaways, they're right in the middle of the pack, kind of sitting there right in the middle. And I think that's a good sign. Takeaways to me, especially in college football, but in the NFL, it's very similar. There's a big luck aspect to it, right? Fumbles, right? Running back fumbles, tip passes up into the air, quarterback throws an errant throw, right? With no pressure. As a defensive coordinator, a defensive football team, you can't control any of that. The running back just fumbles in traffic, unless you do like a peanut punch. You don't really have too much control over that. If the quarterback fumbles the quarterback center exchange fumbles a snap, do you have any control over that? Or how about a deflected pass that bounces off a receiver's hands straight up in the air? There's a lot of luck that goes into takeaways. And when it came to the Aztecs defense last year, I wanted to see were they performing well because they got a million takeaways. They just got a lot of luck. And the reality is not the case at all. Middle of the pack, they were average in terms of takeaways, right? Dead even, right? Right in line with programs like Auburn. Not exactly a great year, from the Auburn Tigers in terms of overall from the program. So it's not like they relied so heavily on takeaways, right? And listen, turnovers, they don't translate. There's a lot of variability there. You can get a lot of takeaways one year and then none the next, right? Now, listen, there's some of that. It could be coaching, like I said, peanut punch, learning how to intercept the football better, getting good pressure on the quarterback. There is a certain element of takeaways that is translatable, and that is the pressure element, and that's where the sacks are. And you can see, once again, San Diego State, well above average in terms of sacks. They could be a little bit better. That's one area that maybe his defense could have been better in. But in terms of raw sacks, well above average. So the one part of takeaways pressuring the quarterback that could translate, San Diego State under Ulrich was, again, very good. So I think this was an outstanding A-plus hire for Nebraska. Obviously, they've done a great job this offseason in short order trying to bring in coaches to sort of get this program in a better position because right now they're at a crossroads. They're up to a competent team. That's good. But they need to take that next step. And I think a defensive coordinator hire like Ulrich is a great move to get them to that level. All right, we got more to break down here when it comes to Nebraska. But first, Huskers fans in the comment section below, want to hear from you guys. How do you grade this hire on a scale of A to F at the defensive coordinator spot? Do you love it? Give it an A+. Do you hate it? Give it an F. Are you kind of in wait and see mode? Give it a C+ or a B. Give us your thoughts on this hire with the letter grade. Really want to hear from you guys and give us some reasons why in the comment section below. But when you look at the production from the defensive coordinator, it's also only part of the story. And part of it is mentality. And there's a humorous story that went out when it came to Ulrich. If you go back in the day when it comes to this guy, and I'm going to pull up this post here, courtesy of a humorous X account, Pavelka's Fat Uncle is the name of the account. So speaks to a little anonymous account on Twitter here. But this is an interesting report he highlights. So the new Husker defensive coordinator used to drink beers and fight cops for a hobby back in the day in Minnesota. Then he screenshotted a report here. According to a criminal complaint, a Duluth police officer working overtime at Grandma Sports Garden saw Ulrich going down some stairs and witnessed Ulrich accidentally kick his shoe off and have a difficult time putting it back on. The officer said Ulrich had a hard time walking. He was staggering and swaying. He tripped on some more stairs and flung himself toward a wall, the officer said. Ulrich allegedly told police he didn't want to leave the bar and kept asking why he was being removed. An officer grabbed the football player's left wrist. Again, we're talking back in the day. He was a kid. This wasn't like last year or anything like that. To push him away as he tried to advance in the officer. The complaint alleges Ulrich was accused of then pushing the officer. A second overtime officer came to assist and attempted handcuff Ulrich, who refused to cooperate. An officer pulled the taser and told Ulrich he would use it if he didn't put his hands behind his back. After several more warnings, Ulrich allegedly said, "Don't tase me," and put his hands behind his back. Now, listen, I know he was a college kid, and this is an ideal behavior. And listen, I'm forgiving of college kids, of course, young people. Listen, I was a young guy once. I did a lot of stupid stuff, really stupid stuff. And so I'm not saying this is who Ulrich is. But I do think it speaks to a sort of a humorous mentality and a guy who gets it. One of the things that can happen with some coaches when you bring in, I hate to use this term, but when you bring in like the nerds, the analytics guys, the guys who never played football to be coaches, they just don't understand football players. They don't just understand the stress. They don't understand the situation of college sports, especially the tradition, the demeanor, the atmosphere of everything. And Ulrich's a guy who does, obviously, right? He's a guy who's played college football. He's seen the dumb stuff that kids can get into. He knows what it's like. So he's a guy that can relate. He's a guy that can be authentic and communicate to the players. And that's really important. Sometimes these coaches can look really good on paper, really good in X's and O's, and they do really good on the telestrator, really good in interviews. but can you communicate your message to the players effectively and consistently? And can you relate to them? Can you be authentic? That is so important, especially in these big time programs. It's one thing at San Diego State when there's no media attention. Nebraska is going to get some buzz, right? And there's going to be a lot of eyes. Go Big Red Nation is going to be all over. Obviously, the entire coaching staff, and the coaching staff should expect nothing less. So the reality is you got to be able to be authentic. You got to be able to communicate. You got to be able to handle yourself well and do a great job of leading these young men. And sometimes these nerds and these analytics guys, they're great with the schemes and the strategies, and they understand situations. And here's where you go for 2. Here's what you do on 4th down. Here's the right time to call a blitz. Here's why you shouldn't call cover 2 against Ohio State, whatever it may be. But the reality is, if you're not good at communicating the message, it doesn't matter. You can have a great message, but if you're a bad messenger, it'll fall apart. And I think Auric's the guy who has a chance to be not just a deliverer of a great message, but the right messenger for that message. He can relate to the players. Big Ten football, old school, former player. And if I go back to the picture of him, going to the very beginning here, I mean, guys, he kind of looks like a Nebraska football coach, right? If you told me, close your eyes, like, okay, who would I expect a Nebraska coordinator to look like? I mean, that's kind of the build, the beard, that's kind of what you would expect. Not that he needs to look that way, of course, but again, it's a guy who just feels like he gets it. He understands, and I think that's important, right? Now, the most important thing is a good coach. He showed that at San Diego State, massive improvement. I've already walked through the data. I just think the fact that this is a guy who understands football, who understands what goes into the day and day. When I played college football, my best position coaches and the best position coaches I saw were guys that played at least college football. The worst ones were the guys who never played a snap. They just couldn't relate. They couldn't connect, and the players knew it. Auric's not going to have that problem. I expect big things from him in this Nebraska's defense starting very early in 2026.